So this is part A. It's obviously 2 minutes before midnight, but this is part A of Thursday, the 18th of November 2021. And we are running with this one. The Tories do as the sleaze, which is the admission by the private eye, which was one of the outlets that joined the corrupt, depraved DEFRA in publishing a complete pack of lies to suit the DEFRA attacks an agenda and the narrative that the criminals of DEFRA had confected against BabyAngelGeronimo. And Private Lie published a completely cruel and criminal and untruthful denial of BabyAngelGeronimo's innocence and BabyAngelGeronimo's being in the best health. And that was about the time when Dominic Lie's son, Dominic, the lying son of the lying Nigel Lawson. Because Dominic lies, so often we call him Lie's son. And other criminals, right-wing reactionary morons, repeated the various evil untruths confected by depraved DEFRA against the perfectly healthy, beautiful BabyAngelGeronimo. Now, what this admission by the Private Lie sums up is that the fact that a government department not only did that lying once, but the government department was lying for weeks, for months, for years. Lying intentionally as part of a criminal plot to do harm to an innocent target of their lying and lies. That actually illustrated the propensity to lie about other innocent targets and innocent parties. That is what is coming to the fore. And that is the sleaze row which is being used by the public in all the references in the last few weeks to sum up the corruption that dominates Boris Johnson's mind, the minds of Boris Johnson's cabinet members, the minds of most of the people who suck up to him for simply careeristic purposes. That is not good for society, if society exists, of course. That is another matter that we shall be updating on. It is not fit for purpose. The cabal that Boris Johnson has been fronting is not fit for purpose. The lies that they have been telling about the various decisions they make, the lies they have been telling post facto, that is, after the events, after they get caught, after they get caught inconveniently, then they actually confess, and they don't confess even then without further evidential pressure being brought on them. So we shall be talking more about the pack of lies that depraved DEFRA confected with the active participation of the criminal Christine Middlemiss. This criminal is supposed to be the chief vet, and she has been doing nothing but concocting crimes and criminally concocting various excuses and plots in order to justify the conspiracy hatched against the perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. We should be talking about that more. And this is the piece. Well, this edition of the Private Lie was, of course, written before the weekend. So the printing and distribution process takes the cycle. When they complete the writing and the layout, etc., it takes about 3 days. So they finish by the Friday, I think, and they get undergo the process of transportation, etc., and by the time this reaches the news agents in central London during Wednesday of the fortnight, and the actual paper is dated 2 days later, the Friday, which is so this one is differently dated, I think. They should be Friday tomorrow, which is the 19th, but this one is appearing to be differently dated. But in any case, this edition, this cover, was available at newsagents near the Palace of Westminster yesterday. And yesterday was one of the days in the last, let's say, 4 weeks that witnessed a number of events. And those events we shall be coming to, focusing on events like the evidence that the Yorkshire County cricket player gave the day before, which is the Tuesday, to the media select committee in the House of Commons. Now, the coverage in the Fleet Street papers during Wednesday, the coverage of the statements made by Azim Rafiq, I would say it was the appearance of Azim Rafiq was a historic event. Historic in the sense that Parliament is itself racist and in denial. And the fact that the contents of the evidence that Rafiq delivered were so extensive and so irrefutable that the credibility, the claim to being a committee of oversight, a role, the credibility of the committee of MPs was put at risk if they dilly-dallied and refused to hear Azim Rafiq's statement. So that was reported in the papers in Fleet Street yesterday, which is Wednesday, which reporting was very prominent. Whatever the biases in the Times and the Sun and others, we discussed that in the edition yesterday, but despite the biases and despite the evidence to deny the perpetration of racism by Yorkshire County Cricket Club players and England Cricket Club players, the overwhelming message was unmistakable. And that message is continuing in Thursday's papers, mainly in the back pages, which is the sports pages. In a very long kind of engagement I have had with the Fleet Street, with the diagnosing Fleet Street over decades, the widespread coverage, and the coverage is based on the contents, not because the editors wanted to, but the coverage is driven by the contents of the victim's testimony, which is Azim Rafiq. And that would normally be ignored. Complaints or claims against racism made by an African or Asian person in this country would be usually ignored or suppressed or denied by the Fleet Street racists. But they made an exception, not voluntarily, but they had to kind of admit the evidence that was given to a member of the group of committees. And I shall come to the Liaison Committee perpetration by Johnson again yesterday. Because Johnson yesterday appeared before the Liaison Committee, which is made up by chairs of the select committees in the House of Commons. So that is called Liaison Committee, with the name of the committee being called Liaison Committee gives the game away. It's not an investigative committee of MPs inquiring into the behavior, the standard, the corruption, and the lying and the lack of honesty by the incumbent in the post of prime minister at the time. So what that gives away is the fact that all the MPs in the House of Commons, they don't operate honestly. Most of the MPs operate under the whip. That is to say, they're given a direction, they're told by the chief dictator, which is the given leader of the party. In this case, the leader of the party being Boris Johnson. And he gave the order. He gave the order for the Conservative MPs to mess up the recommendation by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. And he allowed Andrea Loathsome. Andrea Loathsome is a corrupt, crooked, selfish liar who has crept up the grease pole, despite the fact that she has been a crook right the way from the start. Andrea Loathsome is a crook, as is Nadeem Dorries, but we shall come to Nadeem Dorries later. So Andrea Loathsome was the front person who contrived a kind of motion that effectively meant that if her contrivance was supported by enough MPs, which it was, then the recommendations for a suspension of 30 days for Owen Paterson would be kind of undone. And if that recommendation was undone, then Paterson would remain an MP and would not have to suffer the 30-day suspension, which actually, although it reads or sounds like a minor thing, it's not minor. Because once an MP is suspended for 30 days, an automatic trigger for a recall petition is brought into being. And once that is triggered, that particular MP, in effect, faces an election again. And given the circumstances of the allegations against Owen Paterson, any recall election by election would result in a heavy loss of votes by the Conservatives. That was what the liar Johnson's target was. He was bent on avoiding a by-election of that kind. So he was able to get this Andrea Loathsome's motion through. But as soon as that happened, an unexpected by the Johnson and the co-crooks in his cabal, a very unexpected and unprecedented outrage occurred. And that outrage included significant numbers of conservative MPs who condemned Johnson as crook, as sleazeball, and the rest of it. So extensive was the coverage of the outrage against Johnson that despite the fact that he got the motion through, quote, protecting Owen Paterson, he immediately, typically, dishonestly, congenitally lying Boris Johnson staged another U-turn and said he no longer believes Paterson should be supported. And he completely disowned the very vote in the House of Commons that he had engineered, protecting Paterson. It soon became clear to the liar, Boris Johnson, that his own kind of electoral legitimacy was going to disappear. So what does he do? He says that, I don't know who Owen Paterson is. Who is he? Just like his father in the last 24 hours said, who is Caroline Noakes? I have no recollection. Well, it's not the same kind of set of events, but that is the same kind of denial. It actually is with traditional kind of embarrassment that is completely undeniable. Johnson's spokesperson in the number 10 Downing Street said yesterday that Stanley Johnson is a private individual. The fact that he had groped two women, that fact was put to the office of the incumbent Johnson Prime Minister. And instead of owning the fact that Stanley Johnson is Boris Johnson's father, which biologically he is, they resorted to the device, number 10 spokesperson or spokesman or spokeswoman, and got the device even to an embarrassingly shallow point, saying that Stanley Johnson was a private individual. Now, that was not the query. The query, of course, has not been published in the kind of detail that would make it possible for me to quote it, but the effective question or questions were to Johnson through the Downing Street machine. What did he have to say? The question wasn't about the status of Stanley Johnson as a private individual or not. The question was about the morality, lack of, the ethics, lack of, shame, lack of, on the part of the Johnsons. When he was asked the question about the depraved Defra's lies against BabyAngelGeronimo, the liar Johnson said the same thing, similar things. Said that it was a difficult decision, but he had to agree with the depraved Defra. That was lie. That was pack of lies. There was no difficulty in admitting the truth, which is that the BabyAngelGeronimo is the perfectly healthy BabyAngelGeronimo, and he has no need. The baby angel Geronimo never needed any suspicion to be attached to his state of health because he was healthy from the start and he has been healthy since he arrived in this country. So there is, and also the baby angel Geronimo has been kept at safe distance so that there is a guarantee that he would not come into contact with any other creature that might be theoretically described as being in contact with him. Baby angel Geronimo has not been in contact with any animal. All of this transparent, all of this open. And yet the liar, Boris Johnson, looking straight at the baby angel Geronimo, denies seeing the baby angel Geronimo. The baby angel Geronimo is dancing around, running around in the space that he has been allocated by his mom. And Johnson looking at that and his cabal of depraved liars looking at all the evidence of baby angel Geronimo running around and enjoying his healthy life, says that he doesn't see that. Instead, he says that he doesn't see any of that. And he says he sees only the evil image that has been portrayed before him, and he goes for the evil image. So that's like seeing all the evidence that he has seen about Owen Patterson, all the evidence he has seen about David Cameron, all the evidence that he has seen about everything else that he is making a so-called authoritative point or giving the orders for any decision or series of decisions to be made. And what he sees, he denies. What he is faced with as direct evidence, objective evidence, universal evidence, his first propensity as the congenital liar is to deny the truth he sees. That's why we call it evil land and evil regime. When he was told about the many instances of lies that he had perpetrated over the career, including the lies that he has undeniably perpetrated about the various political so-called decisions, political in the sense that it's not about an individual like the baby angel Geronimo. Let's make the distinction clear. Political meaning a set of principles, set of policies. The fact that the policies are wrong, that are based on evil, malice, is of course involved, but generally, when they are being kind of referred to collectively, they are not referring to an individual like baby angel Geronimo. Let's just put that. We'll come back to baby angel Geronimo in a few minutes. So what happened when Johnson was told, repeatedly told, many things about Ireland, the agreements between the UK and the European Union about the various treatments that the people of Ireland would be kind of facing as a result of the Brexit. And he was told that many of his approaches about Northern Ireland would imperil, that is, put at risk, the Good Friday Agreement. All of these have been detailed. And the liar either lied or failed to answer questions about Northern Ireland, stunningly illustrated by David Miliband, sorry, Ed Miliband, during one very short session in the House of Commons. And you can see the visual kind of body language of Ed Miliband in an intellectually, morally, ethically, intellectual, superior position compared to Boris Johnson, who was physically down. So Johnson can never claim that he wasn't warned against the dangerous impact on the economy, on people's lives, etc., of the lying pact called Brexit that he boasted about. He was told that the claim that Turkey was going to become a member of the European Union was beyond fantasy, that it was absolutely impossible. It was an absolute lie. But that was the lie that Johnson capitalized on. And the fact that he could capitalize on that was dependent on the widespread idiocy and ignorance on the part of the people he was actually appealing to. Most of the people in Little England are brainwashed over centuries, brainwashed into thinking that Muslims are negative and anything against Muslims is positive. So that's what he was capitalizing on. It's not that he said that as an accident. He said that the Turks would come and invade Britain if we don't leave the European Union. Turks will never become members of the European Union. Turks have never applied. In effect, and the European Union bureaucracy, regardless of whether it's made up of countries including Britain or not, the European Union bureaucracy is itself hostile to the Turks becoming a member of the European Union. And yet there was Johnson lying about the Turks joining the European Union. He was told that he was lying about the EU getting 350 million pounds a week from the British. That was a lie. And yet he carried on the bus saying that that was the truth, and it is not. So that those are the kind of samples of Boris Johnson being the leader of the Conservatives, or a leader of the Conservatives at the time in 2016, when the lies about Turkey and the lies about the NHS were perpetrated by him. So the first thing that the congenital liar does is to deny the truth, and when confronted with the truth, he then drags his feet. He only stages U-turn. That's the pattern. When he is given no option but to follow the demand that he told the truth, or he would lose his position, because that's what Johnson has come to. Johnson is not going to survive for very long unless he changes so thoroughly, so drastically, that everything he has done so far is completely forgotten and reversed. So I'm looking for the front page of the European, the New European. This is the New European, which comes out on Thursdays. It's a weekly outlet, and it's an outlet that actually campaigns for the return of the UK to the European Union. And the two items on the front page of today's edition. The first one is by Ken Clark, which says Britain is now close to an unelected dictatorship. And one by James Ball is that Boris Johnson reveals himself at the Garrick. Now, we shall do the details on each later. But the first thing about the unelected dictatorship is a reference to Boris Johnson kind of having the propensity to override any democracy or democratic decision that shows him up, and he cannot sustain a democratic position. He cannot survive a democratic position. So that's what has been going on. So this heading by Ken Clark, or the heading given to the piece by Ken Clark by the New European, is wrong. And that shows the timidity and the stupidity of the New European itself. So we shall be, this one is £3.50 and it has got 48 pages. So you can compare the actual value that you are getting from this program. So this is the piece, 2-page piece on the headline with the Ken Clark. And there is this quotation. And they're saying that Ken Clark has been in politics for 50 years. And this quotation reads, traditional Tories are quite upset by the style of the government. Moderate Tories are upset by right-wing nationalism. This is putting the truth in a very shallow way. And the James Ball's piece on page 9 is headed Boris Johnson and his callous disregard for democracy. Now that comes closer to the truth, but still not as clear and as transparent as what we offer and have been offering. And there are many other pieces. And what is it saying about the Garrick Club? Let's see what the Garrick Club is saying. So this is what I referred to before I actually opened this page, which is the triggering mortis, scrap Northern Ireland Protocol. As the UK threatens to trigger Article 16, raising the prospect of a trade war with the European Union, people on the island of Ireland wonder if any of this political theatre is really about what's best for them. So what they are talking about is that although Northern Ireland is still treated as part of the United Kingdom, all signs are that Johnson will sacrifice Northern Ireland, which has cost so many lives and so much money and the rest of it. And Ireland would be united by Boris Johnson. Think about the irony. And this criminal, John Kampfner, this racist criminal liar, is a spy because he has got platforms everywhere, and his wiki entry is full of his connections with spurious outlets. This criminal liar, John Kampfner, sent an email or a tweet to our campaign. And in that, he expressed typically racist surprised that he was sent anything from us. We never sent anything to him. He's too small. We don't. This campaign and the campaigns that I front and organize has no record of ingratiating ourselves with anyone, especially not the likes of him. And the fact that I campaign and have campaigns is live, continuing evidence that ingratiation with the people in power is the exact opposite of what I stand for and the campaigns I organize stand for. I mean, I gave up a job. I refused a job in the British civil service because I would not tell a lie, which was the prompt. A prompt was about my political, personal record. And it would not compromise me if I told the truth. But the fact that I was asked that question was itself objectionable. So I objected to that. And I said, I'm not going to answer that question. And the woman who was asking me the question, probably the recruitment person, thanked me for my honesty. And I left. I never applied for the civil service job again. I've said no. I've said no to so many jobs that the list is too long. And the reason why I have said no is because saying yes to any job, including the BBC or whatever, would necessarily entail my accepting lies, if not necessarily having to tell lies. And it would be a lying kind of experience. So I never said yes. I said no to offers of jobs and employment, whatever. And so therefore, when Johnson or anybody else tells lies and I happen to observe that, my first moral instinct, responsibility is to spot that, note that, and then point that out and diagnose that. It doesn't matter who the perpetrator is, what nationality, what religion, what faith, whatever. As long as somebody in the public life, like Johnson, does tell lies, that becomes legitimate area of inquiry for me. And that has been going on for a very long time. And for example, everything I have said about liars has been vindicated. For example, the fact that I said that little Ian Pissoff is a liar is vindicated in the contents. And we shall come to discuss BabyAngelGeronimo more, because what our campaign which treats BabyAngelGeronimo as a morally adopted child, ethically adopted child. We believe that BabyAngelGeronimo is a symbol, is the symbol, universal symbol that summarizes all the moral things, all the ethical things, all the universally desirable, good, standard things, criteria, against which or by which to judge the evil behavior of the likes of the Defra's depraved, George Injustice Eustace. These are people, petty-minded people. Johnson, who overdoes his Latin and Greek kind of linguistic skills, he is essentially a very narrow-minded, small-minded individual. So small that when he was challenged about getting it wrong about calling Muslim women wearing burqas resembling bank robbers, he went on the defiance mode. That mode, defiance mode against innocent women, unnamed women, being called looking like bank robbers, that at once, in the same kind of statement, defied his obligations in clerical terms, in terms of religion. That is to say, no correctly minded kind of moral person of any faith would condone the personal vilification and demonization of people because of their faith. And the concept of lakum dinukum waliyad din, that is ingrained in the Islamic consciousness, that to people of other faiths, the Muslim should say, your faith, you follow your faith and let me follow mine. That is the dignified, very neat coexistence doctrine that has existed right from the start of the Prophet, peace be on him. So Boris Johnson is actually ignorant. He has not heard of this. And if he has heard of this, then he has decided to deny knowledge of it and to defy his duties. Okay? So we shall be talking about Johnson's denial of knowledge when he actually overstates the level of his knowledge. What does he do? He tells people at every opportunity he gets that he knows Latin, he knows Greek. But what that shows is the stupidity, profound ignorance. Knowing a particular language, as Johnson claims to do, does not equate him being moral, being knowledgeable, being truthful. That's a point that I have made before, but I'm making it again. Because in the last 48 hours, pictures have emerged of Johnson writing some Latin or Greek script in front of a group of people. Why would you do that? Because there is enough transliteration and translation and interpretation facilities around that you don't need to do the original Greek or original Latin or whatever in order to get across a particular set of knowledge and principles. You can always translate, you can always transliterate, you can always interpret, and you can contextualize. The fact that he feels the need to do that shows that he is very insecure and he needs to prove himself, as if that proving of himself would put him in the kind of higher position where he can be, as he apparently claimed since childhood, be the king of the world. In the history of the world, as we can access, there has been no king of the world. There have been people in positions of being kings, but they have not been kings of the world. And all the evidence that can be accessed shows that To aspire to be a king of the world is a very lethal, deadly, suicidal proposition to begin with, and it should be avoided. Now, the new European, is talking about Johnson as a dictator. Well, he has always been a dictator. The main definition of a dictator, on the evidence, is that a dictator is irrational, is essentially ignorant, and essentially opposed to all things that make society, constitute society, humanity, care, democracy, civilization, and all the other values that people attach to society and so on. And here is the Financial Times, which is called Financial Crimes. We call it financial crimes because it hides the truth about big business, hides the truth about capitalism, hides the truth about military industrial complex, hides the truth about the many layers of lying that allow the likes of Johnson and Trump and others to operate. Despite the fact that it says that the Financial Times is the Bible of capitalism, it doesn't really contain anything remotely ethical in the contents of the coverage. Now, here are some confessions, but these are confessions that don't actually make the connection, they don't join the dots. These are scattered pieces about capitalism and capitalists. And once they actually tell the truth about capitalism, this is what I'm saying, as soon as these papers, and especially the Financial Times, stops lying and puts the dots together and tells the truth about the details of the behavior of these corrupt organizations, which all of them are corrupt, big business, every single one is absolutely corrupt, then they will begin to be entitled to call themselves Financial Times. Otherwise, they remain financial crimes, no matter how long they've been in existence for. They've been existing as financial crimes, hiding the truth, hiding the details, hiding the connections. So the Financial Times is not alone, but because it calls itself financial, I am putting the onus on it in that way that it has got the onus, the duty and the obligation to put to the readers and put on the record the details that it knows about how big business steal from the public, how the stock market works, how the stock market is operated, and how stocks are sold and bought, and how that is completely against anything social, anything societal. All the items in the Financial Times, for example, are full of grandstanding, big platformed displays. For example, here it has got a piece about Gupta being given 586 million guarantee by Edinburgh. Let's read a bit of this to get the point of what I've been saying in the last 3 minutes. It says, the Scottish government has been forced to disclose that the value of the taxpayer guarantee it provided to metals magnate Sanjeev Gupta's business was 586 million pounds. Following a near 2-year freedom of information battle with the Financial Times, the amount was the total gross guarantee provided when Gupta's GFG alliance bought an aluminium smelter in Lochabar near Fort William and 2 nearby hydropower plants from Rio Tinto in 2016. And Gupta had said to the Scottish government that the investment, that is the money that he was stealing from the public, could create 2,000 new jobs. Could create 2,000 new jobs. But in fact, only 50 people were hired, and that didn't last, which is why Gupta is in the quote news. Now, Gupta is an Indian born of Punjabi descent, but he has been mainly brought up in this country and has had extensive involvement as a crook with the widely crooked British companies and big business and financial operations. Now, Gupta is like Greensill from Australia. These two are connected, but even when they are not connected, like this operation involving the Scottish government, they behave identically. They make big promises about big numbers of people being given jobs. For example, in this case, that's not the only thing that they do, but that is evident in this particular disclosure. And they don't materialize. So if you look at the kind of robbery committed against the state by the likes of Richard Branson, or in the case of Amazon, Amazon, far from the image that Amazon has, the money it has acquired, let's say, Jeff Bezos, is not the money that he has earned or Amazon has earned. It's mainly money, like Robert Maxwell about the Oxford County Council giving him de facto control of the Haddington House, from which Maxwell ran his corrupt publishing organization for a very long time without giving the money back to the people of Oxford. So Jeff Bezos has been a thief, stealing from the American public, and as has Richard Branson, who has been stealing under various excuses and pretexts. And so is Gupta. So you pick any of the big money names and you examine what they've been getting from the public, from society, which in principle they decry, but whom they rob without any hesitation. You will find that most of the big capitalists have amassed big so-called fortunes by stealing money from the public. And this applies to Gupta as it applies to Jacob Rees-Mogg, as it applies to all the friends of Boris Johnson who are listed in this special investigation in the latest edition of Private Eye. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds have been paid to crooks under various aspects of these schemes, the scams under the COVID emergency. Think about that. So this particular item is about the Financial Times itself, which has been putting freedom of information request to the SNP government in Edinburgh for the last 2 years, asking questions about Gupta. So let's read a bit more about the freedom of information questions. And the agreement involved the Scottish government guaranteeing 25 years of power purchase by Gupta's company from another business owned by his father. It's like yesterday's papers reporting that Brenda's favorite son, according to reports, Andrew, was able to borrow 1.5 million pounds from one part of the company he owned or he was involved in. And this was paid back in 11 days, within 11 days of that borrowing by another part of the same company. So here, let's read this one. The agreement involved the Scottish government guaranteeing 25 years. Think about the length of time. 25 years, most people involved would not be around. And so therefore, a lot of the liabilities would not be honored. That's a typical feature of the big business corruption, when they steal money from the state and the public. So the agreement involved the Scottish government guaranteeing 25 years of power purchases by Gupta's company from another business owned by his father. Can you believe that? How many local people in Scotland have been kind of unable to set up their businesses because of lack of funding, investment? Compare that with the robbery that Nicola Sturgeon was complicit in. The now collapsed finance company, Greensill Capital, remember I mentioned that, was then able to transform this contract into 295 million of debt, which carried the same credit rating as the UK sovereign bonds, funding Gupta's acquisition of the last remaining aluminium smelter in Britain. It's open robbery. Gupta once hailed the savior of steel. Which criminal moron came up with that phrase? It is completely without basis. And yet he was hailed savior of steel. How could they? Became because of his promises of resurrecting moribund metals plants. So if you look at the contents of the piece in the Financial Crimes, this particular piece is itself based on the 2-year battle that they are claiming they had with Nicola Sturgeon to get this information. So if you look at the information, the 2 years battle they fought to get the information, the facts, and you find the evidence is completely shallow. They're not critical, not remotely critical of the corrupt robbery system that allowed Sanjeev Gupta to loot and rob and allowed the Australian criminal Greensill to join in the robbery. Think about that. It's hundreds of millions of pounds, billions of pounds of public money that a very small number of criminals operating in or through or via or in the periphery of what is nationally called the City of London. And they're doing this despite the fact that the rest of the country, rest of the demography, rest of the population is undergoing on a daily basis, shortages, regardless of whether the shortages are triggered by the COVID-related kind of emergency. There have always been shortages, debts, and low income for the many. Millions of the people in the country suffer low income throughout the year, and no incentive is given to them, and no support is given to them with any money, the like of which they can only dream about. Whereas the crooks like Gupta are given hundreds of millions of pounds, and there is no accountability. The most that you can get from the coverage by the likes of the financial crimes is cover up. It doesn't. And I'm not saying because I've read the whole piece yet, but I have read more than that piece over a very long time. I read that kind of thing every day. And I read the court papers, I read the legal papers, I read the textbooks, I read all the other so-called scholarly reports, the inquiry reports, findings, and so on. And based on all the reading and studying and examining and checking, I can say on the evidence, not because I am the one who is saying it, but on the evidence, anyone can check, cross-check, fact-check. And I'm saying, based on all of those activities, that the newspapers do not tell the truth, despite the fact that they are referring to aspects of the truth, but they don't tell the truth. For example, the whole of the last, let's say, 3 weeks, 3 concentrated weeks of Boris Johnson lying to deny the sleaze by Owen Paterson. Although there are headlines, superficial headlines, about MPs revolting, MPs criticizing, the public criticizing, and all the rest of it. Fleet Street has intentionally misinterpreted every aspect of the episode as being somebody else's fault, not Boris Johnson's. Whereas it's Boris Johnson who has been the main criminal in shielding himself and shielding Patterson and other crooks. This is why the newspapers are lying. Newspapers must be stopped from lying. So what this program does, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, is exactly pointing out the lies and telling what the lies are doing to the rest of society, and concluding that these lies must be stopped. There is disgraceful, there is evidence of disgraceful stupidity on the part of Nicola Sturgeon. Sturgeon is the one who is being, in fact, referred to as the Scottish government. Because nobody would make a decision to fund or give guarantees to Gupta without Sturgeon say so. So the financial crime says the Scottish government provided its guarantee, which covered annual amounts varying between 14 million and 32 million, in return for a fee. That fee had been valued in the government's accounts at 21.4 million, but was later written down to zero. Can you believe that? Millions of pounds of potential debt by Gupta were written off by the Scottish government. Gupta said the investment could create 2,000 new jobs, but the Scottish government disclosed that fewer than 50 extra people had been hired. GFP said the Lochaber aluminium smelter is a profitable operation, and GFG Alliance commitment to invest in a new recycling and aluminium billet plant there will secure the future of the operations, create new high quality employment in the area, and provide opportunities for the local supply chain. That's it. There is no comment. There is no critical comment by the financial crimes morons saying that it's all bullshit. That statement is a bullshit. And the rest of the financial crimes is like that, shallow. Its cover price is nearly £3, £2.90, which is the costliest cover price after the daily bribing Boris Johnson graph and the Times and the Guardian. So what we are doing every edition of the World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street is saying what they are containing and saying what they are not containing. They're not telling the truth, and they're leaving out the majority of the people in not just in this country, the majority of the people working in factories and companies and operations everywhere in the world that they refer to. There's the Financial Times we are talking about. Other papers don't even recognize the existence of the world. As we say, to the Little Englanders, Little England, that is not even the England, the Little England is bigger than the rest of the world. That is how sick and ignorant and stupid these brainwashed people are. And those sick and ignorant, stupid, brainwashed people are the main kind of criteria. Their response, their so-called instinct, are the ones that Boris Johnson aims to draw to his activities. And they're the ones who actually drove the hatred against the European Union. They are the ones who drive the hatred against society, the idea of society. And they are the ones who actually drive the intolerance of any system of democracy, democratic accountability, etc. Even if many of them are themselves driven to starvation and hunger. That is their physical experience, but morally, they remain enslaved to the very idea, to the very principle, to the very agenda that keeps them down, keeps them hungry, starving. Remember, that is the explanation of what we do. Now, yesterday, when Boris Johnson kind of staged his stunt as the PMQs, the conservative benches, that is conservative MPs, stayed away. They didn't attend the charade. It's not something that had happened before. So what is happening is that Johnson literally is being deserted. And this piece in the I newspaper, page 3, by Richard Vaughan, who describes himself as the chief political correspondent. That is, this piece is actually connected with what I said about the government benches or benches on the conservative side in the House of Commons when Johnson performed the Prime Minister's questions. We shall come to the Prime Minister's questions and the telling off that Johnson was given by Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker. And he says, by the time Boris Johnson arrived to address the 1922 committee of his backbench MPs, that is the Conservatives, who are not members of the government and are not frontbenchers. They are the ordinary members of the Conservative Party. They are called the 1922 committee. That is the nearest form of Conservative MPs in the parliament. So by the time he arrived, his voice was rasping croak. So his voice was a rasping croak. After an unusually fiery Prime Minister's questions, Johnson had a 2-hour grilling at the Liaison Committee. So there are 3 there. One is the Tory backbenchers 1922 committee he addressed. Then the Prime Minister's questions he addressed. And then he had to appear before the Liaison Committee. Remember, at the beginning of this edition, I have talked about the Liaison Committee. So, reading that paragraph again, the second paragraph. After an unusually fiery Prime Minister's questions, Johnson had a 2-hour grilling at the Liaison Committee before he attempted to rally his troops within the bowels of the Commons. But if he hoped to receive some sympathy from his colleagues, he was mistaken. Politics is an unforgiving business, and already the Conservatives are taking aim at their leader after a series of what they believe are unforced errors. Having sparked the Owen Patterson sleaze scandal himself, remember? As I said, the papers are blaming others as if Johnson had not even lived on this planet, had arrived from some outer space. But this is the one where this Richard Vaughan is admitting that the sleaze scandal himself, he has created the sleaze scandal himself, that is Johnson. So reading that paragraph again, having sparked the Owen Patterson sleaze scandal himself, Mr. Johnson has tried and so far failed to bring his members of parliament back on board. As one conservative told me, everyone is knackered and there is a real feeling of discontent within the party at the moment. In particular, there are deep misgivings among the new 2019 intake, particularly those in the former Red Wall constituencies who are sitting on tiny majorities. The same MP said, none of these MPs has been in this situation before. In the middle of a parliament, when they are expected to defend unpopular government decisions, and they're refusing to do so. Now that's true. They may be even less likely to do so in the coming days, which is what I said. He's sinking, Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister today breaks his pledge on a new rail line across the north of England and on the eastern leg of HS2, in a move that is sure to stoke even more unrest among his northern backbenchers. Now, we shall talk about the HS2 later, because this is not about the HS2. This is just a kind of passing reference to HS2 in this comment by Richard Vaughan. So we shall talk about HS2 in another part of this program. Further plans to dial back support for the poorest pensioners in the social care reforms is likely to spark outcry. It was telling that Jake Berry, once Mr. Johnson's biggest cheerleader in the Commons, chose to openly question whether Mr. Johnson would break his promise to northern voters during the Prime Minister's questions yesterday. Another warning sign for Johnson are the whispers that the likes of Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, someone regularly tipped as a future leader, is hosting drinks in a bid to build a support base. So what they're saying there is that Liz Truss is trying to succeed Boris Johnson as the leader of the Conservatives. Downing Street will hope that such talk is nothing more than tittle-tattle, coming at a time when MPs are restless, with little to do in a party with an 80-seat majority. But members of parliament are already questioning if this is the start of the decline and fall of Boris Johnson. Now, that phrase, that question about the decline and fall of Boris Johnson is not just mentioned in the Richard Vaughan piece in the I newspaper, but it is almost everywhere. Why? Because the decline and fall of Boris Johnson is happening right in front of us. Because all the lies All the lies that Johnson has perpetrated have got together, if you like, as soldiers, and they're marching at Boris Johnson direction. And what these lies combined are demanding of Johnson is that he must deliver. That is to say, he must deliver every single promise he made, which was a lie. He must deliver evidence in support of every single lie that he perpetrated. And he must apologize. He must remove the stigma of lying, racist, hate spewing behavior. Now, this is a piece by the man called John Craze. Now, John Craze has got the ambition to be taken seriously as a kind of forensically truthful kind of commentator against the liar Johnson. But I think he falls way short of doing that because he somehow fails to connect the dots himself. So, but he is referring to Lindsay Hoyle, the speaker yesterday. Lindsay Hoyle condemned Boris Johnson, and I'll come to that in this piece. So here is a piece that is very, very kind of appropriate here. This is something that takes us back to Boris Johnson lying for depraved DEFRA against the innocent, perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. Here is a piece reminding of that, not about baby angel Geronimo, but reminding readers and the public of precisely what one of the central defects in Boris Johnson personally. So this is like the Richard Vaughan piece. This John Craze is summarizing the various things that Boris Johnson had to do yesterday, various meetings that he had to attend, etc. So he's saying, things went from bad to worse, with Johnson eventually getting called out by the speaker for getting generally unpleasant and obstructive. Starmer normally plays it safe and passionless, but this time he went for the jugular. Johnson was a coward, not a leader. Someone who had who had been investigated by every organization to which he had been elected, and most places that he's worked for that matter. Johnson cannot say sorry. Johnson believes that rules don't apply to him, and Johnson rows back on every promise. The joke isn't funny anymore, Crace quotes Starmer. Things didn't get any better for Johnson when he appeared before the Liaison Committee, the super group of select MPs. The super group of select committee chairs later. Even the mild-mannered William Ragg, who is one of the more docile Tories, inadvertently managed to get the better of Johnson by asking Johnson a simple question about the ministerial code. Labour's Chris Bryant quietly and methodically took advantage of the Prime Minister's discomfort to expose what everyone had long suspected. Now, this is the bit that actually reminds of Boris Johnson's role against the BabyAngelGeronimo. That Boris Johnson hadn't bothered to read the Owen Patterson report before whipping his MPs to ignore that report. Just too much hassle, says John Crace. Yvette Cooper, next up, was having none of the Johnson usual prevarications. She said, did he think Patterson had broken the rules or not? Johnson looked horrified at being asked to tell the truth. But Johnson ran out of road and had no option. If Johnson thought his troubles were over once the questions moved away from sleaze, he was badly mistaken. Everyone went for him, particularly his own MPs. The Prime Minister's life was also falling apart in the Commons, where an embarrassed Gillian Keegan was forced to explain how the government had managed to lose, presumably in the incinerator, the records of the phone calls between Patterson, Randox, which paid him more than £100,000 a year, and the Health Minister, Lord Bethel. It felt like a moment of no return. The government was in meltdown. Rules on second jobs were going to be kicked into the long grass. A minister had just guessed 3 separate figures of 10, 15, and 20 hours that MPs could freelance each week. Chaos. Johnson had never given much of a shit about his own MPs, but they had cared about him. Now, though, the last of his stardust had been brushed away. So this is the problem with John Crace. Because Crace, working for the liar Sarah Vanity, is of course keeping his job. Because Sarah Vanity is an editor in Fleet Street that sucks up to Johnson. And instead of calling him Johnson by name, she is actually colluding with him. This is a piece on page 23 of The Guardian today. And this is continuing. This is The Guardian continuing Azim Rafiq's testimony, appearance before the Media Select Committee on the House of Commons on Tuesday, which was featured and covered widely even in the East Fleet Street papers of Wednesday yesterday. Now, here is the heading that is true, absolutely true, but it's a rare one for the Guardian. It says, Rafiq, this Azim Rafiq, calling out racism is more powerful than Ashes and the World Cups. Absolutely brilliant summary. So, that is true, and that must be based on the contents of the piece underneath. All right, so let's start the item at the beginning. Azim Rafiq says his damning revelations about racism in cricket may have cost him his career in the game, but hopes his painful experiences will serve as a watershed moment. That's what he's saying. Rafiq's testimony in front of the Digital, Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee on Tuesday shone an uncomfortable light on institutions and individuals within the game. And the former Yorkshire all-rounder told the BBC yesterday, that is the day after he appeared before the committee, it's really important that the game and wider society listens to my experiences, and we don't let this moment go, and we try to use this as a watershed moment for the future. I have no doubt that racism cost me my career, but I believe in Allah and that everything happens for a reason. What I have been able to do, and hopefully what we will all be able to do moving forward, will be more powerful than any runs and wickets or Ashes and World Cups. Rafiq also revealed he had received death threats since claiming that institutional racism at Yorkshire left him close to taking his own life. We have had threats throughout, different types, but it comes with the territory, he said. You've got a lot of people in denial, and it's sad, but hopefully we can get through it. He says hundreds and thousands of cricketers could follow his lead by sharing experiences of racism in the game, and warned that Yorkshire cannot move forward until head coach Andrew Gale and director of cricket Martin Moxon have left the club. He told Sky Sports News, I think you are going to get it into the hundreds and thousands possibly. I do feel it's going to be a little bit of a floodgates, and a lot of victims of abuse are going to come forward. Rafiq, whose testimony outlined how he fought depression and thoughts of suicide, said he felt elements of closure after his appearance. He now wants more departures at Yorkshire, following that of its former chair Roger Hutton, whose showing at the DCM's committee was described by Rafiq as very weak, and Chief Executive Mark Arthur. Rafiq specifically believes Gale, who is currently suspended pending investigation over a historic tweet, and Moxon, who is signed off work with a stress-related illness, are in untenable positions. Both features heavily in his allegations, with Gale accused of constant racial abuse and Moxon of systematic bullying, including on Rafiq's first day back after the stillbirth of his son. Neither man took up the chance to give their own evidence in Westminster, with Rafiq concluding they had an opportunity yesterday to come down here under parliamentary privilege to get their side of the story across, and they didn't. Now let's put all of that in context. First of all, although Rafiq is saying that this is a watershed moment and all the rest of it, which is, in his experience, that is true. But racism, no matter how personally depressing and oppressive and hurtful it has been to him, racism is not confined to a region of sports. Racism, as I have said before, dominates this country. So as racism dominates this country, all the aspects of racism as the dominant force warrant being examined, and we shall be examining. That is sport, and only cricket, but it is racism is in football, racism is in other sports, racism is in politics, in society, in the political party, racism is in parliament, racism is in government. Okay? And racism, most disturbingly, distressingly, rules all aspects of the National Health Service. Racism is pervasive. Racism is pervasive, and racism is going to be tackled and recognized and admitted and dealt with and removed. Racism is in the media. As I said yesterday, when I arrived for the particular annual delegates meeting of the National Union of Journalists, a member of the NUJ that I had known, called Francis Beckett, who is related to the fascist. His father was a fascist, which he didn't admit until after his father must have died. And he didn't admit when he spoke to me, putting his eyes expression like this, "What are you doing here?" Francis Beckett is a racist liar. But that's not anything like the truth. Francis Beckett is a racist liar, as is every single member of the NEJ. As is every single member of the NEJ who is not African or Asian. But even some, typified by the terrible P-lips, are racist because Trevor Terrible Phillips is a mental slave racist, attacking African and Asian people generally, but Asian people generally, more particularly Muslims. So Rod Little is joining this coverage about racism in Yorkshire Cricket Club. And he's saying at the bottom, he's saying, Azim a hero. This is in the scum, Murdoch scum. So literally saying, Azim is the hero of the week. That is Little calling Azim a hero. Now he's saying that Azim's moving testimony about the racist abuse he suffered while playing for the club was pretty shocking. It was the kind of racism I thought had died out in about 1980. That is Rod Liddell saying that. Shows how wrong you can be. Azim's experiences were only a decade or so ago. The alleged racists were at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. I'm from Yorkshire and I speak my mind, ba gum. Well, indeed, but how about engaging your brain before you open your fat gob, says Liddell, allegedly at racists in Yorkshire. Now, this piece by Rod Liddell completely contradicts everything he said about the Azim Rafiq being a hero. He's saying that the United Nations Human Rights Convention should be scrapped and everything else that supports anyone's human rights should be scrapped, and the asylum seeker should be denied entry even when they come through the channel, and they should be allowed to die. So when I say that racism dominates the country, this is what I mean. Here he is praising Azim Rafiq, and here he is asking for the massacre of asylum seekers. And he's praising Israel as the only country in the Middle East where there is no the only country in the Middle East where there is human rights. He's saying that Israel has human rights and all the Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries, don't have human rights. And the asylum seekers are coming not from Israel, but from all those countries in the Middle East. Which is a pack of lies. So here is the Times of Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch today. Well, the Times of Thursday, the 18th of November 2021, which we are diagnosing. And there is this item in the Times about Zia Christie. Zia Christie, who has been accused of being a rapist by a woman called Spottiswoode, and a company which Zia Christie recruited David Cameron to join. Now, there are various items in there, but the most offensive piece of lie is in this sketch by the criminal Quentin Letts, who doesn't mention, he's the only one who doesn't mention or name Boris Johnson in the headline. There is a picture of Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons. Probably that's a screen grab of the moment he told off Boris Johnson for the first time since becoming Speaker after John Barker was forced to leave in 2019. We shall go back to that page in a minute. Because we shall be looking at this piece that no other paper has been running, not in this substantial way. I may be disappointed by reading the whole piece because the name of the writer is very suspicious. Henry Zafman. Completely unacceptable. See, what is happening is that all the things that the Woodward and Bernstein in their Watergate burglary investigation kind of identified, the main thing that Bernstein and Woodward actually investigated was a simple thing, which is to deny records. Think about that. I'm summarizing the whole Watergate investigation by one single phrase: deny records. The very thing that the liar Donald Trump is doing, deny the records of his activities and his communications about the January 6th riot on the Capitol. I mean, mysteriously, all the records have become unreleasable. Just like the Brenda's husband, that is the Queen's husband, as I said at the beginning, how is it that they are saying that his records So what they're saying is that the records of Philip, Brenda's husband, will not be made available to the public for 90 years, 90 years, almost 100 years. So it's the records that are at the center of the actual investigation for the truth. Now here is the face of Lindsay Hoyle. I think screen grab was made during his telling off. He's telling off Boris Johnson yesterday. That's the insert is the Johnson picture, and the main picture is the speaker. And here is the thing that the Times is running about the mystery of the missing minutes for Patterson call into 600 million deal. Amazing, isn't it? The government is unable to find formal minutes from a call between Health Minister Owen Patterson and the diagnostics company Randox, MPs were told yesterday. So how is it that Labour forced a vote to compel the government to release minutes of meetings between ministers, officials and Randox, having raised concerns about the process for awarding the company nearly 600 million of COVID contracts? Now think about this. When Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions for 5 years, and he was about to retire, about to leave his job after 5 years, Keir Starmer issued a number of procedural obstacles that would prevent some of the poorest people claiming benefits, some of the most vulnerable people claiming benefits from getting the benefits. So it was Keir Starmer, not a fascist by name, but Keir Starmer, who was at that time, of course, not in a party political career, but he was probably heading towards joining the Labour Party. So it happened in the year 2013, and he introduced additional aggravating obstacles to prevent people from being able to claim benefits easily. So Keir Starmer then joined in that behavior. Keir Starmer joined Ian Dracula Duncan Smith. Ian Dracula Duncan Smith was the Dracula in post as the Secretary of State for the DWP. Deprivation, want, and poverty creation. DWP. With Starmer having politically murdered the Labour Party, there is no chance, there is absolutely no chance that he will do anything to sink Boris Johnson morally or ethically or politically or in terms of compassion. I mean, Boris Johnson is not only anti-compassion, not only anti-caring, he is completely devoid of humanity in terms of the humanity that he should support about the human rights of the people. So he is already doing worse. He is doing worse than what Rod Liddle in Thursday's Scum newspaper wants him to do, wants the government to do. That is the racist fascist Rod Liddell asking for the scrapping of the Human Rights Convention, and is asking for the stopping of asylum seekers at the border and for returning them somewhere else. So what we are looking at is, as I said, this country is dominated by pervasive racism. Not only that, it's dominated by pervasive cruelty, criminality, corruption, sleaze, and so on. And with Keir Starmer being himself a cruel person, the victims of cruelty, corruption, criminality, and sleaze and misrepresentation and lack of democracy, lack of accountability have nowhere to turn for remedies. So this is the service. This is the summary in the last 2 hours, let's say, of what the main things that are wrong and what collectively the wrongs make this country, in terms of the state, in terms of the government, an evil state, evil country. For example, the various things that the depraved DEFRA conspired against BabyAngelGeronimo, and the various lies that they have been telling against BabyAngelGeronimo can be extrapolated and applied to other aspects of the decision makings and the policies of the governments, so-called. And you can see that BabyAngelGeronimo has been the recipient, target of all the things wrong that they have been throwing at other targets as well. But not one single individual like BabyAngelGeronimo has been targeted in the way that the BabyAngelGeronimo has been targeted for 4 years. And all the pleas, all the rational pleas, all the legal pleas, all the constitutional pleas, and all the appeals to goodness that have been made on behalf of BabyAngelGeronimo, both to the liar Boris Johnson and his predecessor, Theresa May, and to the liar George depraved injustice, Eustace, and to his predecessor, Michael Gove. All of these have been ignored and treated with contempt and have not been recognized by any of them. Now those run counter not only to the European Convention on Human Rights and the rights of the welfare of the animals, but they run counter to the basic principles of the Magna Carta. Remember what I'm saying? And the Magna Carta is the source, is the named source. That every single person who says that the European Union got us into areas that we didn't have to get into because we had our safeguards. So they've been citing Magna Carta as not only the existing alternative to anything that the European Union membership or international forum membership confers on the people of Britain, but that the Magna Carta has been superior, better than anything that the international platforms could offer. That is all a pack of lies. And the fact that these are being done, like this call by Rod Liddell, there is no place, there is no space in the Daily Mirror, for example, or the Guardian most certainly, or any other Fleet Street title where this kind of lunacy, this kind of murderous kind of denial of human rights is noted, dissected, condemned, and opposed. So what you are watching is not only something unique about one aspect, it's about all the politics, the policy, the partisan and the non-partisan, the independent, the objective and the subjective, all the mixes of intellectual, moral, ethical omissions and denials. We point this out daily and point at them, and we highlight and we diagnose the absence of the remedies. So if we talk about the legal forums, the court system, let's go back a few days and refer to this column in The Guardian by Simon Jenkins. He referred in a shorter way to the availability of various remedies through the judiciary, etc., etc. But a piece written by John Humphreys in the Daily Mail group actually shamelessly and completely dishonestly and corruptly boasted that British justice was very well and working, and Parliament was working, the police was working. So the piece byline to this criminal, John Humphreys, who was the fronter of the BBC Radio 4 Today program for a very long time, too long, in fact, is now let loose on the Daily Mail, boasting of all the things that even Boris Johnson cannot now boast in one single piece. Now that boast shows that Humphreys is mechanical, he is being switched on. And the name John Humphreys, the fact that he was one of the lead presenters of the Today program, these are the titles that are being sold. So he has prostituted himself and is selling his body, his name of the body, or the body of the references, to get himself money. And in doing that, he is denying all justice to the victims of lies. The victims of lies that are being denied further, and the denials being aggravated by the corruption of the judiciary. We shall be talking extensively about the corruption of the judiciary in due course, and we shall be updating on the issues that their corruption actually affect, the impact that their corruption, the judicial corruption, actually affects. Now, going back again to this piece by the Times, Henry Zafman, Mystery of the Missing Minutes for Patterson coal in 600 million deal. Let's look at the amount. When Keir Starmer added to the obstacles against the poorest people, he was actually trying to save in his perversion. He was trying to save a few £1,000 per each of the kind of obstructed claimants. But here is 600 million, and there is no record. And it goes on to say all kinds of things about why records should be there, etc., etc. But the fact that this is a piece that doesn't refer to the judiciary shows the lie that David Neuberger perpetrated on the 4th of July 2017, according to the Evening Standard, no Standard. Because Neuberger in July 2017, at which point he was about to retire as the first president of the Supreme Court, Neuberger boasted that when Brexit was done, let's see what Neuberger said as reported by Martin Bentham in the Evening Standard, No Standard. So this is dated the 4th of July 2017, and this is headed, Brexit could boost London's status as world's legal center, Britain's top judge says. And it says in the first kind of paragraph, so he says Brexit could boost London's status as world's legal center, Britain's top judge says. And it reads, the country's most senior judge has declared that Brexit could boost London's status as the world's legal center by allowing the courts to respond more swiftly to emerging worldwide issues. No evidence that that is true. And the lie that Neuberger actually perpetrated there was at the behest of David Lidington. Now, Lidington was at that time in the post of the Secretary of State, Ministry of Justice, serving the cabinet of Theresa May. And Lidington had actually recruited the services of Neuberger to prostitute himself in promoting Brexit. In that way, anyone reading that and being somebody who didn't know about the reality of the court rooms and the court's process in this country would be forgiven to think that London was the equivalent in legal access terms to the country where the streets are paved with gold, legal remedies. Nothing could be further from the truth. The court system in this country are corrupt to the core, racist to the core, ignorant to the core, idiotic to the core. And most of the judgments, I'm not saying every single one, are so stupid and ignorant that to understand each significant act of injustice perpetrated in the name of justice, it would be objectively necessary to undergo or undertake a whole course running several years into disentangling the lies and the fantasies and the stupidities and the corruption and contradictions contained in the jurisdiction, in the jurisprudence, not jurisdiction, but jurisprudence. First of all, there is no access to the many, to the court as a place for remedy. And secondly, there is no audience for people. The audiences are given based on the licensed law trade, either the solicitors or the barristers. That is the license, not the knowledge, not the competence, not the ability to actually know the case, know the facts, and argue and advocate. And there is no regulation, there is no holding to account of the hundreds of thousands of solicitors for their corruption and criminality, and the thousands and thousands of barristers for their corruption and criminality and stupidity. So we shall be talking more about all of those, and we shall be doing that based on the latest available reports warranting diagnosis. This is 18 minutes, coming after 18 minutes after 2 in the morning of Friday the 19th. Friday the 19th of November 2021. So we shall be calling this one to an end. This is Lindsay Hoyle, who in a rare kind of visual statement against Boris Johnson. This is rare. And we shall be talking more in the next possible opportunity, the edition about the continuation of Azim Rafiq's interview on the radio, and also his appearance the day before the select committee MPs.